Good.
We now welcome the judges to give us some comments.
Well, I'm always the loud judge, and everyone who's seen me probably knows that I'm going to give lots of comments. So first, of course, congratulations on an interesting debate. There were some points on both sides that I don't think any of us really considered before this started, and I like always coming up with new things, new material to work with. So I like that. Now, saying that it's close is an understatement for me. When I total up a total of 200 points, at least for myself, this is the second time in history for me I've had an exact tie for points. Now, that means, of course, this is going to be a bit of a split decision amongst the judges. Maybe a surprise to you, may not be, because I think both sides feel that they've distinguished themselves strongly in their aspect, and there are certain parts that I have to agree upon. I want to point out, as far as the biggest thing that's going to break your hearts is new arguments in the rebuttal speeches. Both of the rebuttal speeches had some really solid points that I was waiting to hear in like the cross-examination that were kind of missed but brought up later. Some of those being, okay, the original definition about sexual violence. Now, why would we want sexual violence? It was defined as sexual violence instead of like a sexual service or something else, which really puts this negative, why do we want that? Okay, so it's like, you know, semantics. Choosing the right word sometimes can get you into trouble, but I wish that came up a lot earlier, because it was affirmative one finally came up in the rebuttal. Another one, I kept thinking, if you're going to give out licenses to anybody who asks for it, who's going to control the gangs or the pimps or the prostitutes using a brothel? Because you're saying you're going to remove a brothel, and it was brought up later, what about pimps who control a prostitute? Prostitute just, hey, you, go get a license. Okay, come back here. You're mine. You know, and so talk about, is that really going to stop a pimp if he's controlling prostitutes who now carry licenses? Now they have more protection, because he can say, well, I'm just helping these licensed people, you know, because there are businesses and umbrella companies and things like that. So pointing that out, again, pimps controlling licensed prostitutes as opposed to pimps controlling illegal prostitutes, what's the difference? Again, rebuttal, great idea, a little bit late there. Regulation of the license, that was hit time and time again, and to me that's a big point, is how are you going to regulate licenses? Pointing out in the rebuttal speech over here, new prostitutes. I completely, wholeheartedly, 100% agree with you that after the 3-year grace period, anyone who's brought in is now an illegal prostitute, and now they're in trouble because they don't have that 3-year grace period. What happens if the prostitute gets here the day before the grace period cuts off? She's going to be like, oh man, I'm stuck. I can't tell anybody because I'll get in trouble. Or even later, right? So then, knowing how can you have still some kind of window for somebody who first approaches. You know, it may not need to always be 3 years. You know, okay, well, you just got into the country, you get 3 years. You know, but some kind of thing to allow there to be that safety that you're trying to guarantee the people who are already into it. What about the new people? So again, great point that would point out how their plan really wouldn't work, you know, if that wasn't there. But again, it wasn't brought up in the cross-examination, which means it's actually a new argument, even though I agree with you. Okay. Sweden model. I want to point this out. Oh, first, let me go back to rebuttal here. Conceding about gangs, actually they were asking you about how are you actually going to remove gangs. So they weren't conceding that point, it just was dodged more than once in the cross-examination. Like, well, we said this is going to happen, so it's just going to happen. And when we we legalize prostitution, the gangs will just disappear. So they didn't concede it, they didn't understand it because they were trying to get more information from you, which was dodged. Also about finances, this one I have actually a really big issue. Again, it's like, well, you conceded that we have enough money for it. They didn't concede that. They asked you in the very first -2, asked you about what percentage of tax increase, because we want to know how you're going to get your funds. And it was specifically said, affirmative 1 said, well, my partner, we'll get to that later. And she said, okay, we'll wait for that. Affirmative 2, again, you said we have the money, we have a budget for it, but instead you said, you got to ask us for it. They already did ask you for it. So that would mean you're supposed to give it. Your partner promised you were going to give that, and you didn't. So it's like, well, where did the funds really come from? They didn't concede it. Even though you're pointing out they didn't ask for it again, you're right. But they did already ask for it, which means they didn't concede it. Now, my big issue with the Sweden model is you were claiming Swedish model, Swedish model, Swedish model, right? Which I'm cool with because Swedish model is a pretty good model to use if we're going to be using it. But I think you're cherry picking, meaning you're just taking the parts that you like. The reason why I say that is, again, N2, at the very beginning, she was checking about your Swedish model in cross-examination. She was like, okay, so is this what you're doing? Is this what you're doing? Because these are the Swedish model. And the answer was, well, no, not those parts. So then it's, what parts of the Swedish model are you following if you're not following all of it? And it wasn't elaborated. It was, we're using the Swedish model. Okay, so if you're not using the whole thing, specifically state, this part's from the Swedish model, this part we made up, or this part came from somewhere else. Because if it's not the Swedish model, which it isn't, because instead we're not doing that, what parts are you really doing? Specifically, the people being, the STDs, okay, just asking, annual checkups? I mean, not to be a jerk, but like, I would not feel safe if that was a plan for STDs that people could get tomorrow and then they got tested maybe today or tomorrow and then they've got a year or 2 years, or however long that is, to spread that amongst everybody. An annual checkup to smash your plan, which they pointed out, is probably not enough, okay? Rather it become, you're worried maybe about expense, because if we said, oh, well, we're going to do it weekly, well, that gets too expensive. So you got to find that middle ground, or there has to be a specific way for you to get funds to be able to deal with that additional expense. I think the fear is if we start talking about this really well elaborated plan with these extra expenses. Something that didn't come up was there was an answer of there'll be more police, right? Specifically A2, they're asking how are you going to control where people are going to be having these sexual occurrences and other things. And it was like, okay, well, we'll have more police. Oh, you are? So who's paying for that? Or how many more? Or things like that. So again, a little bit more details would be going for to be able to really put that plan cohesively together. If you are going to crack down on pimps, how? They're just not going to walk away. They're going to want to be able to stay in the business, and having a licensed prostitute under my control would be a lot safer for me as a pimp than my illegal one that could get me into trouble if she gets caught. So things like that are a little bit difficult. At least for me to be like, oh, okay, yeah, sounds like a good plan. I do want to point out that, again, not to bash individuals, but I've got to kind of throw this in there. N1, bro, you look like you have a well-prepared speech. That's not always a good thing. What I mean is, they were talking about annual checkups, so you were up there and you were talking about monthly checkups. I think that might be in your speech, like 1 or 2 months in the speech, but you're talking about still monthly, and if you're connecting it to the specific things they were saying, which is annual, it'd make your points much stronger. I'm not saying that you didn't have a valid point saying, look, how long does it take to get an STD, how long is it going to be, but they specifically were saying we have annual checkups, which would be really a big thing for you to go into. But a lot of that speech looks like it was planned and read. Great, okay, good. All right, where's my other points? Oh, Garden of Hope. Gotta say, first time anyone's brought it up, and I like it. Honestly, I like it. I do think that there could be some more clarification as to maybe like what is the drop training and how. I mean, you said you're going to make posters, like where are the posters going to be, or not maybe that specific, but I mean just how are you really going to get out there? Are they going to be like infomercials, or are we just like slapping up a bunch of posters that the pimps are all going to rip down? When being asked for evidence to bash some people on both sides, particularly when it was like, you need to know your own plan, rather it being what parts of the Swedish model you're going to be following, or you know, when you're specific, I think it was, if I quote, where's the quote that I wrote in there? Okay, sorry. For you it was, give me a second. Like constantly, give me a second. You know, it's like, do you know it, do you not know it? Okay, if it's your plan, please know it. All right? And again, not to bash people individually, just trying to, as a whole group, strengthen us. And one, it was like, do you have evidence for that? Yeah, we'll get it to you sooner or later. And it was like, your teammate, and particularly N2, who's got her speech coming up, so she's got to be getting ready for her speech. She's now like, not even really able to listen, other than to dig through the, sorry, I'm going to get a sexist comment here. She's a woman, she can multitask. I forget that you have multiple skills, way better than myself. I could not dig through papers and listen to the speech at the same time, but you know, props to you to be able to do that. Totally can't do that. But anyway, being able to not put your teammates in a bind. That yes, they need to help you with evidence, but you need to know your own evidence too. Okay? A lot of times, having multiple copies, and actually if you don't want her to ask you a million questions, you're like, yeah, sure, give me a second. You know, you could do that and it would burn her time. She may decide she doesn't want the evidence, or she may say, give it to me later, you know, which is a way of controlling time, okay, which would have worked. But it still would burn through some of her time and not put your teammates in a bind. So there's goods and bads to both. I was thinking you were doomed and when you went up there because you weren't going to hear anything. You did an excellent job. All right. Both teams, I really, really liked how you're pointing out the opponents were agreeing with you on certain parts. That's actually strengthening, actually both sides, that, hey, yeah, we both want to do job training. Hey, yeah, prostitutes want out. Or, hey, yeah, you know, all of these percentages. You're using each other's information, which is exactly what we want to be able to see. Now, who uses it better is always the question. You know, is it you really use better by saying, well, we have job training, well, we have job training. Okay, so who is it more believable that the prostitutes are going to continue to go to job training for? Honestly, it was more believable that the prostitutes would continue to go to job training for you, because after there's new prostitutes, they can't go there without getting in trouble, right? Now, initially, for the first 3 years, they're going to want to run to you guys for the first 3 years. So then it comes down to, well, who has the better job training? Who has the better options for the prostitutes? Long-term, affirmative, you have it for the job training. Short-term, prostitutes are going to be running to you guys if they don't want to be in it, because 85, I think it kept saying 85 or 89, something like that, percentage want to get out. Okay, and you're telling them there's an easy way out. They're going to be running to you. Okay, and it would probably have this prostitution problem, and then coming back, right? Whereas if your plan does work, it would slowly over time. So which has the better option? Stuff. Okay. All that said, we have extra comments? I'll sit down.
Just for the result.
They're just anxious for the result?
Maybe I have some suggestions for you guys, more concrete suggestions for you guys. For the affirmative one, I think what bothers me most is that you don't really address details for your plan. I need a very concrete plan. Even the Sweden models, yeah, any kind of model, we were okay for that, but tell me more details. That's all the negatives kept questioning, but we haven't really answered for that. And for the negative one, the thing I really wanted to address is that since it is already the national competitions, it's not the regionals, I think you should already adjust your script or because once during the national competition, if we are still questioning about what's your evidence, and it's not that interesting at all, because I think you are all well prepared that, but because that the affirmative class, do you have evidence for that? Do you have evidence to show the Taiwanese culture things? That is only the question, because actually you didn't bring out the evidence, you know. Yes.
They might have. They gave it to
yeah,
them.
they given, but if this is the thing that they bother them most, you have to come up with that, because especially for the moral things, not that the statistic that that you should address to make us more convincing. And about there's a thing that's very interesting about the job training. You guys keep fighting with the job, and though mine is bad and yours is best. I really don't know. Actually, I really don't know which one is bad, because I didn't heard anything about the job training. But actually do the competition, the stuck issue is that government should make prostitution a legal business. A legal business, and literally we want a proposition to become a local business. And you keep talking about other job training. That for me is very kind of weird, that why you guys why you should address more on the prostitution things. Why you just cut other things that, oh, we want to give them a higher education, but make us think that, affirmative, make us think that this is a visible policy, to make us think that it's forbidden, is the more issues that is the suggestion for you. So during the next round, please address more, yeah, okay.
I have one more that I just thought of really quick that, well, marked, but I forgot to say, and that is, particularly that app you talked about. We're going to avoid prostitution by just having one-night stand hookups. I would suggest either A, find a way to regulate that, but the bigger thing is, wouldn't that be just a window that somebody could open and be like, prostitutes are going to use this to find clients? Isn't there a way, that you could find people using something like that? So anyway, just thinking about if you're going to have an app to reduce sex by allowing people to have sex, it sounds a little bit like counterproductive for reducing. It sounds like it's opening a Pandora's box to get yourself in a little bit more trouble. But it wasn't pointed out, so it's not really a hurtful thing, I guess. Okay.
For the affirmative, it seems that your SWIT model is very important. So I think you should give the judges and other debaters more details about your SWIT model. And for the negative, I think you can elaborate on what would happen after the 3-year transition. So the plan would be more complete.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Okay, so we got the drum roll. Okay, I'm not a drummer. My bad. Can't keep a beat.
Just say it.
Sure. We gave the victory to the negative. Negative for the win. Obviously, if you have further questions and we're not under a time crunch, which we are under a time crunch, we got to run to the other things. I'm always open to still discuss more with you, but not right now. We're staying here, judges. We stay here.